welcome back to the Rock Talk podcast. My name is Autumn Newsome, and I am the recruiter here in Rockingham County and your host of the Rock Talk podcast series. If you're new here, in this series, we talk about anything and everything to do with Rockingham County, who we are and what we are up to. So in today's topic, we are going to be talking about all about the Sheriff's Office and really how our Sheriff's Office does it, because they are a very busy department that has all sorts of public services. So in order to help me kind of talk about today's topic, I've brought in a couple of special guests from the Sheriff's Office itself. Please welcome Major Chris Bashaw and Communications Supervisor Laurie Roy to today's podcast. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So I'd love for our listeners to get to know you guys better. So let's go ahead and dive into what made you choose your career here at Rockingham County, your background, and what your position does at Rockingham County. So Laurie, would you like to get started?
Sure. So I've been here since November of 1999.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't actually remember what I did before that. No, I actually worked in retail before I became a dispatcher. My best friend was a dispatcher, and she said, "Hey, we're hiring." And at that time, believe it or not, I started working at $8.88 an hour.
Wow. Times back then.
Yeah, and that was a raise. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try, and I have been here since then, and I love it. I still actually really enjoy my job. I enjoy the crew that I work with, and I enjoy the whole process of what a dispatcher does. And it's been a long time, so it's fun. I enjoy it.
Good. And what in your communications shift supervisor position, what's your capacity in your position? What's your day-to-day look like?
So I am a working supervisor, which means I am on the desk dispatching right along with all of my other dispatchers who I'm also supervising. So that does pose a few problems, not in the sense of it's hard to do, but I have to be a working dispatcher, so I'm at the same level as my dispatchers are in some sense, but then I also have to make sure that I'm removing myself enough to be able to say, okay, hey, there's an issue with this call, or when I have to have my supervisor hat on and do that, I also have to do all of my other supervisory or administrative tasks while I'm on the desk. It would be nice to be able to take a step back from that, but right now that's not what we're at, which is fine. We get it done, but so we're dispatching right along all of our other dispatchers and doing the same job as well as supervising the staff.
Right. So lots of hats that you have to wear.
Yeah.
And what about you, Chris?
So I started with the Sheriff's Office back in 2011 as a deputy. Prior to that, I'd started off my law enforcement career in the town of Newmarket. Prior to that, I was in the military, and so I kind of never knew I was going to go into law enforcement. I ran into a couple of old friends that I grew up with when I was actually a bartender in Portsmouth while going to school for electrical engineering.
Oh, wow.
And they came and found me and said, "Hey, we think you'd really enjoy this. You should give it a try." And that's when I started my law enforcement career. But I didn't know much about the Sheriff's Office when I came over, but it seemed to offer a little bit better quality of life.
Sure.
While getting to do law enforcement work, and that's what really pulled me towards it, and it's been fantastic ever since. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm obviously spending the rest of my career here in New Hampshire law enforcement.
Absolutely. And what pulled you to want to work specifically for Rockingham County?
Well, being a resident of the county, geography absolutely matters. I married my wife, who is a lifelong county resident, so she grew up in Kingston, owns a family business in Kingston, and that's where we currently raise our families, and we're very involved in the community there. So it's definitely great working for the community that you live in.
Absolutely. I can understand that. So as a major, I think a lot of our listeners may not know exactly what that job title entails. So can you kind of go into what your typical, day-to-day is like?
Yeah, mine is much less exciting than many of the deputies in their jobs, but somebody has to provide the oversight and do all the administrative stuff to allow those services to happen. So I work day in, day out. I have two captains that I work with. One is our operations division captain, who handles really all the different things that the deputies fall under in those different divisions. And then I have my administrative services captain, who he is the sworn officer in charge of the dispatch center. So he actually works with Laurie, and then he does any of our training and other administrative tasks that come to bear. So every day, essentially, my job is making sure the overall administration of operations that we do on both sides are happening every day. In addition to that, I manage federal grants, or I do a lot of outreach with legislation or testimony that's required for new laws that are going to impact sheriff's office operations. And then every day I sit down every morning with the sheriff and the chief deputy, and if there's other initiatives or other avenues that he wants us to pursue and take, I sit down with him, he sets the mission, and I'm expected to go out and find the ways that we're going to make it happen and bring it back to him and see if he's good with that.
The make it happen person. Yep, absolutely. So we've gotten to know you guys. I'd really love for our listeners to get to know what sort of services our sheriff's office, provides. I think a lot of citizens might already know that the deputy sheriffs are out on the roads. The dispatch operators are, dispatching those services to, emergency situations and whatnot. But can we do kind of like an overview of the sheriff's office and what exactly, each department does, kind of interworking with each other so that our citizens get the best services they can?
I'll start with dispatch. So I think a lot of people don't understand what an actual dispatch center does. They think, we just tell, a fire truck to go over there or whatever. So in the state of New Hampshire specifically, there's a 911 call center. So if you call 911, it goes to either Concord or Laconia as a 911 call. And then that call is then filtered down to the police or fire service in all of the different dispatch centers throughout the state. So at Rockingham County, we have our
24 police departments,
24,
19 fire and EMS.
26 get given.
26 currently, because we're helping some other towns.
So we're covering some other towns and our 18 fire departments. And so we'll take all of their calls and then dispatch the rescue, fire, police, whatever first responders need to go to each place. What a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes at the desk when a dispatcher takes a call. If it's a domestic disturbance, we get who's there, how many people are there, who has weapons, who's been drinking, who's been aggressive to law enforcement before, has anybody been assaulted, is anybody hurt? There's a plethora of questions that we go through, and we stay on that phone call listening to all of the stuff that's happening in that house before police arrive. If it's somebody who has perhaps stolen a car, or they maybe know the person's name, we see what we can do to find that person's name, find their address, find contacts, anything like that. There's a lot that we do that goes unnoticed because people don't understand that that's actually what the dispatchers are doing. They think, the detective of the police department must be right there for them. And yes, obviously the police officers are doing jobs way beyond the scope of that. But when that initial stuff is happening, there's a lot of that information is coming from the dispatch center there. We're the very first people who are taking that call, those in progress calls, and trying to get as much information to give it to our officers so they have as much safety on scene as they can. And the same with fire calls. We try to make sure we're telling people to evacuate their house. If there are pets still inside the house, are there any other structures that are involved? So there's a lot that goes on other than just saying, your house is on fire, I'll send the fire department there.
Right.
And one of the things people don't realize is that they actually have to decipher between conflicting, because if you have one incident going on, you may have multiple callers calling in, and they're providing you, because of their perception of the event, they could actually be providing you with conflicting information about either witnesses, suspects. So you have one person telling you, it's absolutely this person, looks like this, wearing this, and then somebody tells you, no, I think they're wearing this, that, and the other. So the dispatchers are also trying to cipher through that information to make sure they're putting out the most accurate information to the responding folks so that they have a complete picture. But sometimes the reports actually cause a little bit of more confusion.
Right. And you can also hear a lot in a person's voice. You can listen for the lie. In that, do you have a gun? No. Hey, I think you do. So we have that, it's listen for the lie or hear what's not being said in either the way they answer or the questions that they don't want to answer.
Right. I think being a dispatcher and in any capacity, you have to be equally as good as listening as you do reacting. And so what is it like personally being behind those phone calls, being in charge of getting, the right people to the right places?
when you first start, I remember when I first started, it was so frightening and overwhelming that I was going to send the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And any dispatcher who's been doing their job for as long as I have has absolutely had a mistake that's been made. You mishear something or you misunderstand. So it's a little bit scary at first, but once you really start to know the job and really start to understand the geography of the places you're dispatching for and your tone of voice, officers' voices and those things, you start to know what they want or anticipate what they want, or because, you've worked the same kind of call, whether it be, traffic crashes, they're going to need a wrecker, they're going to need ambulances if there's airbag deployment, those things. So we try to anticipate what our officers need before they need it. But it can be overwhelming at first, but it's also kind of exciting in its own way.
So I know you wanted to talk about all the different things. So I'm probably going to touch on a ton of stuff really quickly because there's so many things that I think people don't realize we do at the sheriff's office, or that falls under the umbrella. So initially we have, there's the deputies that you see out there patrolling in the communities. We have a patrol division that will assist smaller towns with calls for service. They'll respond to, bigger critical incidents, but they're also out there. They'll serve court-ordered paperwork, which is a statutory obligation that comes through the court systems that we have to process and serve certain civil process. One thing that confuses some folks maybe from other states is that sheriff's office actually has nothing to do with the jail. We don't run the jails here. It has a separate superintendent that is assigned and has full control over the jails. And in the state of New Hampshire, sheriff's deputies are full sworn law enforcement officers with full unobstructed statewide jurisdiction. So there are certain things that we can do over and above certain other officers or state troopers because of this court appointed stuff that we get as well. But we're able to do every other criminal, motor vehicle, any type of investigation that involves violations, thefts, homicides, anything. So we get involved in all of that. So the different divisions that encompass the deputies are the patrol division, which also serves civil process. We have a warrants unit, which is responsible for any felony level case that's prosecuted within Rockingham County, regardless of which town maybe initially generated that. If they fail to appear for court or they violate some of the terms of court, the Superior Court will then issue warrants. Those warrants get entered by our NCIC technicians and our dispatchers. And then the sheriff's office, we go out and try and rectify those warrants essentially and arrest those folks that have failed to appear for ongoing court appearances or violations of terms. And up until we also extradite prisoners from out of state. So if it's a very serious crime, there could be nationwide extradition, say for a homicide suspect. And if Texas picks up this individual and the county attorney's office says, yep, this is extraditable, we're willing to, commit the resources to bringing them back, our deputies may actually fly down there, bring them back on a commercial flight, and escort them back to the state to be brought to justice in the state of New Hampshire. In addition to that, we also have our investigations unit that handles investigations. We do a lot of stuff for any contraband or violations that happen in the jail. We have to investigate that. If there's any allegations that happen in there, we investigate any potential crimes that may have occurred on the county grounds in the nursing home. And we also, it's a follow-up for any of the other self-generated activity that our deputies may have out there that needs further investigative work, or if it has a nexus to our drug task force, we'll involve them to expand out into those areas. But another service we've been offering is a lot of communities, because of how small most of the towns are in our county, is that you'll have communities that may have a conflict of interest case. They may have a case that they can't investigate because there's a nexus to somebody close in town, or maybe it's a town official. We actually have been handling a lot of those conflict cases for those communities. Or sometimes there's been a big change in law enforcement, and a lot of people have left because of kind of the national rise and fall in popularity of police. So there's a lot of people that have left the career early. So you do have a lot of towns that may not have super experienced folks. So if they get a complex investigation that they feel they need assistance on, that, they're not willing to risk not doing proper service to a potential victim. So they'll reach out to us, and sometimes we'll help with some of those other cases that are very complex, or they just need additional help because they may not have enough. They may have barely enough officers to provide patrol coverage for their town.
Right.
Never mind dive into a very complex investigation where you have to process a lot of evidence or do a lot of follow-up. So, and then in addition to that, we have our court services division. So those deputies, they will transport inmates, prisoners to and from their court appearances. So we will pick them up at the jail, pick them up at the state prison, other jails around the state to bring them for their court appearances within Rockingham County. So we do transport a lot of inmates and prisoners in that regard. And then in addition to that, we have other subunits within the sheriff's office. We do have a K-9 team, and those deputies are assigned to either patrol unit or investigations as well. But they're out there with their K-9 officers. We now have 2 certified patrol K-9s. One of them is narcotics certified. The other is scheduled to go to narcotics school soon. So we'll have 2 K-9s that are dual purpose patrol dogs that do that stuff, and the 2 deputies that are assigned to those animals for their care and safekeeping and training. And then in addition to that, we also have a warrant entry team, which is a tactical team for the sheriff's office. One of the things that we're not a full SWAT team. We don't have enough, but
Right.
we augment and we can help some of those other regional tactical teams should they need additional bodies for an operation. But one of the things that we encounter that many people probably wouldn't think you'd ever need a tactical team for is that we engage high-risk evictions. Let's face it, when you get to the point where somebody has to be physically removed from their house, some are much more committed to not leaving than others may be. So we may have high-risk situations where we actually have to employ a tactical team to enforce those orders by the court. Now, some of the other lesser-known items that we are involved in that folks may not know about is I mentioned we have 2 NCIC. We have a full-time and a permanent part-time NCIC position. So those are the folks that are entering all the warrants in and out of the system that come through the Superior Court. And it's a very important part when they're not available. It would be an additional duty that falls upon dispatch, and they have enough work already.
It's already one of the services we provide to all of the towns that we dispatch for. So any town that has warrants that they need entered into NCIC dispatches the place that does that for them as well.
Yep.
And for those that don't know, what is NCIC?
I'll let you explain that better.
So if you have anything that's entered on the level of felony level, actually even now in-state warrants are considered non-extraditable misdemeanor warrants in NCIC, but any warrants that are entered into the system, so that I can enter a warrant for, let's say, Stratham PD, and any place in New Hampshire that runs that person's name and date of birth can see that, oh, Stratham Police Department has a warrant for this person. And the same goes on the national level. It goes through a system called INLITS, which is the National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System. So if somebody in Virginia runs this person, they know, hey, this person has a warrant in either out of Rockingham County. It will say whether or not the warrant is extraditable, meaning we would send somebody to Virginia to pick them up and bring them back to answer those charges. So we handle that for all of our towns that enter anything into the system, whether it be a stolen vehicle, missing person, elderly, endangered, or juvenile. People can be all entered into NCIC, as well as stolen bicycle. Anything that can be entered and has a serial number or a number on it that can be run by a law enforcement officer to say, hey, was this stolen? Guns, everything. We put all of those into the system.
Yeah. And so they're another really behind the scenes. They don't get a lot of credit. They don't get a lot of acknowledgement, but they do a very important piece.
Absolutely.
We also have some civilian staff that manage the window at our civil office. So those are if anyone has paperwork that has to be served by the courts, they'll generally see those ladies at the window. They're the ones that explain to them, hey, here is the process of how we're going to serve this paperwork. And, they get assessed fees, which are set by statute. And, but that's how we handle that. And then last but not least, we have the bailiffs at the Superior Courthouse.
Right.
So part of the statutory obligation is that we maintain security at the Superior Courthouse. So the gentlemen that you see whenever you go to the Rockingham County Superior Court, they're in the red blazers. Those are actually Sheriff's Office personnel as well. So they're actually vetted and processed and trained by the Sheriff's Office. If you go to some of the district courts, you'll see ladies and gentlemen in blue blazers, and those are administrative office of the courts. Court security officers. So we handle the superior courts, and the state actually handles the different circuit courts around the county. But yeah, so in total at the sheriff's office, we have just under 100 employees between bailiffs, dispatchers, deputies, civilian staff, and everyone else that's part of that support system.
Wow. So there is a lot of moving parts at the sheriff's office. So I think, you guys have a lot of tenure at the sheriff's office. You're it's very easy for you to kind of explain the different moving parts of it. But how does the sheriff's office do it, which is kind of the title of today, because you had mentioned there's just under 100 employees doing all of that. That is so many moving parts. So what's the culture like at the sheriff's office and there's so much communication involved? How do you guys do it?
I would say
I open up the door and I yell, Chris!
I was going to, I did not invent the wheel.
Right.
I came into a system that, as far as the coordination and communication, we were a functioning entity. I know the current Sheriff Macias, when he came in, we've expanded into some different things because we wanted to offer different services to the communities where we saw the need. We don't necessarily want to. We're not looking to take over what anyone does. We just want to help augment them. So so I think it's just that culture of communication. So one of the important things for us is we have weekly command staff meetings. It used to not happen like that. So one hand wasn't talking to the other. So we're all part of the same agency, and we didn't know that this was even going on the other side of the sheriff's office.
And speaking as somebody who's been there since 1999, when we were just the guys in brown. They were, the deputies were, oh, what do your deputies do? They just serve paperwork or whatever.
They jokingly referred to us as a retirement community for cops.
Yes. Oh, goodness. That was back in 1999. And since then, especially with Sheriff Macias now, there's so many new initiatives to drive the sheriff's department forward and to make it I really truly believe, a law enforcement entity that's no longer the retirement community for officers. It's a place where people you have a lot of younger guys coming to us, younger guys and girls coming to us as, deputies and wanting to be there because there are chances to start at the bottom and work your way up to the top or go into the different divisions and have you're not just out there serving paperwork or shuffling people back and forth to the court. There's a lot of new and exciting things. It's actually, for me, it's been really sort of cool to watch the growth that the sheriff's department has had in the last almost 30 years.
Yeah, and it really is. It's there. I had more, even not fully understanding what the sheriff's office was when I moved over there. I had no idea. I ended up having so many more opportunities that I wouldn't necessarily have had if I stayed working in a smaller police department my entire career. So it was a real eye opener. But the nice thing is that, we tell people when we hire them here with Sheriff Macias is that, the sheriff's going to come talk to you. This isn't a culture of, you have some law enforcement agencies, it probably happens in bigger municipalities or cities where it's like, oh, you're not allowed to talk to the command staff or you're not allowed to talk to the boss. So like when all of a sudden the sheriff's like, hey, come here. You're probably not in trouble. He's probably going to be asking you about your family. He's going to be asking how your personal life is. He's that leader that wants you to be happy at work as well. And it's difficult. We have very difficult jobs, especially dispatch center has been short staffed for a couple of years. It's very tough getting people into that career field because it's shift work, because there's mandatory overtime at times.
Nights, weekends, holidays.
Yes. And it's not easy because it's open 24/7, but he really has created that culture of, we want to balance as much as a quality of life outside of the services we provide, but that we have life safety services that we have to provide. And that does come at a cost and a sacrifice to the men and women who work here, as well as the families. But I think we've done a really good job of, we can't always accommodate every request or need, but we really try to at least hear them out and make them feel it is important to us. Like the mantra, I think that even the chief deputy, brought to here with the sheriff is that we really do want you smiling coming to work, not just when you're leaving. You spend too much, and I've always told people, I go, we spend too much time at work to be miserable.
Yeah.
You need to make the best of it. But we're in the business. We're in the business of stuff goes wrong. I mean, that's kind of the nature of our job.
Right.
So we deal with it. But there's no reason it has to be uncomfortable or miserable to be at work. We can really still have a good time. And I think that culture of positivity and the fact that we do care about your home life and your family life, and we try to balance it with getting the job done.
No, it's definitely a place where your voice is heard. Not that we can always do something about a bad situation or a conflict of work times, but at least we're all being heard. And I just stood in the civil office today and had a 15-minute talk with the sheriff about our staffing and trying to find new ideas of ways to overcome the hurdles that the entire profession wide is facing. I've been in Chris's office and sat down before and had to, have conversations that either involved work or my home and personal life, where the next day I come in and Chris is like, hey, are you okay? Is there anything else we can do? What else, what else, whatever you need. And that's really how we all work there together. I think for the most part, everybody there cares about everybody else that's working together. It's not an I place. It's definitely a team. I know that sounds trite or whatever, but it really, truly does resonate.
Yeah.
With somebody who's been there, especially as long as I've been there, going through some different command staffs that didn't want to push the place forward as much, and now being there, it's great.
Yeah, and operationally, to kind of get back to the core of your question, it's you have to trust your leadership. You have to trust your leadership to do their job. If you try to micromanage the operations of the sheriff's office, you will actually just impede them, and you'll fall on your face. Our other command staff members and leaders, dispatch supervisors, right down to the sergeants and the deputies, and even those not in leadership positions, they make us look good every day. They go out there because we try to make sure we're invested in them. We hire a caliber of person that we can go out there and trust to do their job, because with the sheriff's office being county-wide, there is a lot of autonomy. I can't physically have a supervisor right next to you while you're with deputies all over the county. So we have to hire good people that we trust to do the right thing, represent us well, and do their job well. And we've been very successful at that. We are the first to hold our people accountable, because I think one of the things is that if the agency knows and the people that work for you know that you're going to hold them accountable, but be fair about it, you're going to get better product out of them. And they're not going to be like, well, why should I be performing at this level if others aren't expected to perform at that level? So we expect a lot, but we try to give back in how we try to relate to them and really empathize and sympathize with their work-life needs, and we just get great product out of people, and it's fantastic. But you have to trust your leadership to do their job, and they have to trust their people to do their job. Trust but verify.
Right. Yeah, I think, a good working culture where everybody understands that, everybody is doing the absolute best they can to, continue moving forward is certainly very important, especially in positions where, the service of the public is at stake. I know that, Laurie, you had kind of touched on, the fact that the sheriff's office is always looking to progress and always looking to move forward. So any projects that we're currently working on, any new initiatives or innovations that we're currently working on to continue that progressiveness? I think that Rockingham County, in all of our departments, is a very progressive county. So what exactly is the sheriff's office doing to continue that?
As far as the dispatch center is concerned, unfortunately, it's more of a static sort of department. We have the places we dispatch for. I shouldn't say that. We're currently in the process of revamping our entire CAD system. So our computer-aided dispatch center, we're getting a whole new system. So myself and my captain, Walsh, and several other people in the department are working on making sure that the new system that we're going to be switching over to is as user-friendly as possible, and that we can get all of our information that we already currently have moved into that system.
And that impacts not every town that we dispatch for, police and fire, because it allows much more information, but it's also an important part of the records management system for all the communities that are linked into us as well.
So that's one of the major updates that we're working on now. Also,
really, the building is really a big thing, because the new building across the street, the sheriff's office was kind of placed on the top floor of the jail over 30 years ago temporarily. And it was probably too big for it then, and it's definitely too big for it 30 years later. So one of the important things is, we're getting a whole revamped dispatch center. So not only will there be room for more consoles, because there have been needs, especially during COVID. We had communities that they had a COVID outbreak in their dispatch center, and we had to take over dispatching that entire town that we had never done 24 hours for a week until they could recover from that. So having additional consoles, we do have a new radio channel, because our two primary channels that we dispatch police on, Rock East and Rock West, all these communities are getting busier, so we have a third channel where the infrastructure is being put in. So we're going to need some additional dispatchers for that. But having a space, if you've ever been up to the dispatch center, it is a dark room, no windows, very cramped, no space. Everyone is right on top of each other. When people are trapped in that room for 24 hours a day with no windows, it's tough.
No, we were talking about that the other day, that the new building's going to have windows, and I was like, I don't know. I haven't had a window since 1999. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I'd be like, oh, it's too bright.
But it was funny, and there, kind of one of those things where we were touching on before with like the sheriff is he's a people person. When they designed the new building, the first generation draft, the builder said, oh, well, the sheriff's going to want the corner office and the nice thing. The first thing he's like, no, he goes, dispatch center needs to go in that part of the building.
That was actually amazing.
That's going to have the best view. They're the ones there all the time. He goes, put my office out back. It doesn't matter to me. And that's huge because you don't see that type of, people are like, well, no, I'm the leader of this organization. I want that. That should be for me.
Yeah. And we were all the way in that other corner.
It was going to be in the back again, isolated almost with no windows. But, and that was great to see because it showed the appreciation for the work they do. And they're there 24/7. I'm very lucky. I'm mostly a day shift individual now. So I get that benefit. And it was great to see that we put it out there. But the building is going to be huge for the services we're able to provide. And just having our own space finally that's actually set up like a police station. Mm-hmm. We've never really had that. There was the old we're in what used to be the old juvenile lockup section.
Yes.
That was converted
they have
into the
offices.
sheriff's office.
Some of the guys have offices that were closets.
The sheriff's office, as far as patrol functions and law enforcement functions, we're not looking to take work away from anyone, but we want to be a tool if they find themselves in a situation where they need some assistance from us. We want to fill that void. We've had some towns that have experienced, kind of, lack of a better term, a mass exodus of employees, whether it be to retirement age, just due to getting out of the career altogether. And they've came to us and they're like, can you please help us? And the rumor always was, oh, the sheriff's office is trying to take over this town. And no, we absolutely don't want to do that. We want to help stabilize you, get yourself back up to full staffing. And then, we want you to have your own autonomy. We're not looking to take that away from you. But what we're finding is right now we're dispatching for 2 other communities that are facing dispatcher shortages as well. So overnight, we're actually taking on these communities that already have their own dispatch center, but they can't staff them. So down the road, we were told to plan for a 40-year building. So the new dispatch center, we're going from 5 consoles immediately to the room for 10 consoles.
That's great.
And it'll have a partition to another half of a room, which if over 40 years dispatching gets so big here, we need 20 consoles. We have the ability, but until that happens, we have an emergency operations center. So if there's a critical incident anywhere in the county, they can actually come here and place us in that emergency operations center, being one doorway away to a full-fledged dispatch center that can communicate with all those entities and have it as available for a community. So it could be anything from a critical incident to a natural disaster. Mm-hmm. And we have a place now where these communities can come use that emergency operations center if we need to put that up. So I don't think it's weird. I always try to balance that word of growing. It's not like we're just trying to offer more services that fill voids that we see.
Right. So we've touched on some of the struggles that law enforcement agencies can come across. Staffing can certainly be a struggle, especially within these last few years, lack of windows. But in all seriousness, what sort of struggles do we see law enforcement agencies, Rockingham County Sheriff's Office, but also our police departments, fire, EMS, out in the towns in the area? What sort of struggles do we see that these agencies go through, and how does Rockingham County help mitigate those struggles?
I think, we're seeing it obviously, like I said, you see this roller coaster in the popularity of law enforcement. It seems to happen within every decade. It seems to be kind of like a 7-year swing where publicly, nationally, oh, we love you. And then it's okay, some terrible things have happened. And now there seems to be this sometimes manufactured distrust, and it takes a lot to build that back. So it's everything from, doing the community outreach stuff to making sure that we're being as transparent as possible while maintaining privacy of certain things. But, So as those communities see those swings, like you said, we just want to fill that void. Like we're helping out with, different types of investigations, as, a department may be in a stage where it has very young officers and doesn't have experience with a certain complex investigation, or they just have a lot of vacancies right now. Could be a number of reasons, but we just want to offer them some services or help out whenever we can while we have folks there. But yeah, I'd say it's, and when we're dealing with issues of the economy, as we work with the commissioners in the county delegation and all the different departments of the county. It's finding that balance between making sure we can pay people appropriately to retain them. And you do that in the recruit, being part of the recruiting, you're seeing that every day. And it's a difficult balance because people are also struggling because of the financial burdens as a taxpayer on the outside of that. So what are they willing to fund? But we can't force people to come to work. We have to entice them to be here. And if there are other options, we have to get creative. So I know we've worked with you in the past. Just when it comes to hiring of open positions, there was hiring bonus incentives for certain positions that were struggling in the county. So I think we've been having to adapt on a daily basis to figure out what's going on. I've never seen as much sweeping change in a short period of time as I have in probably the past 6 years, especially to law enforcement, first responders in general. And, New Hampshire, I think we've always done a really good job of holding our folks accountable as a profession. And I think we really do set a great model. I think it's great how we all train under the same academy in New Hampshire, whether you're a state trooper, whether you're a deputy sheriff, whether you're a local police officer. We all go to the same academy. So there's a set group of rules that everyone's expected to follow. And I think we do it a little bit better than some states. And I think it's benefited us well. But yeah, it's kind of roll when you have the state with one of the biggest legislative bodies in the world. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff comes down the pipeline. And that's why one of my roles is I do actually pay attention to a lot of legislation. And then at times I go and testify either for or against it as it will impact us.
Yeah. So, gosh, what was I going to say? I'm going to edit this part out. What was I going to say? So, okay, yes. So, we have kind of talked about how the deputy sheriffs, police officers kind of get involved in their community to make sure that they are heard and they're seen, and that presence is always kind of there so that people know that they're safe. So I think a lot of citizens know that, police officers and deputy sheriffs are out patrolling, but in what other ways are potentially not seen by the citizens that the sheriff's office gets more involved in their community?
This might seem silly and maybe not exactly the answer to the specific question, but as far as it being involved in the community on the dispatch level, obviously I'm talking to citizens who are having usually their worst day. Yeah. They're not calling to say, hi, I've had a great day today, and I hope you are having one as well. They call because they're in trouble, they're having a domestic, they've been in a car accident, they've lost their child, something. But is to make us not look good, but to make sure the community knows that it's okay to call. I think sometimes people are like, oh, I shouldn't call. I don't know if I should call this. And it's something as simple as saying, especially if somebody who's calling in something like a reckless operation or just calling because there's trash on the side of the road or something. Okay, well, I appreciate you calling. Thanks for calling in. I'll make sure somebody takes care of that. Just knowing that it's not just, why are you calling? What do you want? Okay, whatever. It's a positive experience on a phone call. As something as simple as that can make the person say, wow, I had to call the sheriff's office and have them come out because there was a coyote running around the yard. Now, granted, when this is New Hampshire, you're probably going to have a coyote in your yard at some point. But rather than being rude or belligerent to that person, which I have had, everybody's seen that, either the YouTubes on bad police. There's also a lot of YouTubes out there on bad dispatchers. Making sure they have that simple conversation and that they were heard. Like, I think a lot of everybody in any situation, it's all about, was I heard? And okay, great, they took care of it. Whether or not I hang up the phone and think, it's New Hampshire, of course there's a coyote in your yard. I don't, I make sure that I take their call as an important call, because to them, it is very important that they called.
Yeah, and I kind of, little more out directly in the community versus that. One of the things we try to convey to the deputies is that you don't want every interaction with the public to be enforcement action. You don't want every time you're talking to a citizen, it's because you've pulled them over for a motor vehicle violation, or it's because you're investigating a crime. So we really encourage that. You see the kids at the lemonade stand, stop and say hi to them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you see people out, stop. If you see a basketball game or a baseball game going on, get out and talk to folks. And it's funny because it's a double-edged sword, because sometimes I'll have people call me. I'm the point of contact for all official conduct complaints.
Sure.
So, I may get that call of, well, why was the deputy hanging out at the ice cream stand talking to those people? It's important. So one of the particular things recently, I had somebody call me and said, hey, I just wanted to thank you. Your canine officer stopped by What's the Scoop in Kingston, saw a group of kids out there, and he stopped by and he handed out the little baseball cards with his dog Saber on it. And he did a quick 10-minute canine demonstration in the parking lot. He didn't have to do that, but he saw an opportunity to engage with the community, and that's about that trust building, so that when you're more involved in the community and they see you as somebody that can just go up and talk to them at any time, and it's not an adversarial, situation, it allows them to come to you and open up to you when they maybe have something difficult to bring to you that's going on in their life, or maybe they've been a victim of something and they're afraid to come forward because they don't have that sense of trust. So we really try to encourage people to understand that, yeah, you may have seen a deputy, he may have stopped by a baseball game that's going on. It's not that he's doing nothing. He's engaging with the community, and you get a lot of important information from that. I know I was involved with Cub Scouts when my kids were younger, and I've coached youth sports, and I used to show up, if I was working in uniform, I'd stop by a Cub Scout meeting, introduce myself to the leaders there, and that's where you're building the relationship with the kids. And I think, I've always been a huge proponent of SRO programs in all the schools and communities, because I think children seeing that police officer day in, day out, and establishing a relationship with them, I think they're very open to come to them to maybe speak to them about stuff that they made, so that we don't have to always be reactive. We may be able to prevent situations from occurring if we've established those relationships with the community. So that's always very important. And it's, we encourage deputies. Yeah, if you want, we assign deputies we ask for volunteers with any of the school safety committees that happen. So a town, the normal police department, they're very involved with their school and their SAU, but we've had them say, hey, you guys are in the county area. If something happens here, we want you to know what's going on. So would you like to come to some of these meetings? So we actually have deputies that sit on some of the school safety committees for the different SAUs, and we're not looking to step on the toes of any local police departments. It's usually by invite from them. Mm-hmm. But we're just like, hey, actually Monday through Friday, we probably have more resources on duty during a school day than any other agency in the county. So the more we know about your particular locations or situations, we can actually make it safer for everyone.
So I think our listeners have really gotten to know all of the aspects of the sheriff's office. Like I had mentioned at the beginning, a lot of citizens know that, the deputy sheriffs are out there patrolling, and we're here to help the police agencies, and we have dispatch that's here to help as well. But I think we've really kind of gone a deeper dive into exactly what services we have. So I appreciate you both so much for being on today's podcast. It's been great to have you both. For our listeners, you can always get connected with us on all sorts of social medias. We have Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can connect with us on our podcast. Once every month, we are posting on both Apple Music, Spotify, as well as YouTube if you want to watch us. Once again, appreciate you both for being on today's podcast.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate being here.